Welcome to Sunday Morning Sermons, an online ministry of Family Bible Church of Rotterdam with pastor and teacher Tom LeGodais.
Good morning.
Good night.
We're going to be looking at John chapter 18 verses 12 through 40. Now we looked at some of John last week on Resurrection Sunday, but we're back to preaching through John. So we might skip some other stuff that we looked at on our Resurrection Sunday. Before that, I just want to mention one quick thing. I'll keep praying for the church. And pray for my friend and mentor, Pastor Paul Nobley in Georgia. His sister had a brain surgery. She had a tumor on her brain. So just pray for recovery and quick healing for her. I really want her to heal. And he was there with her for at least over a week, and he's back in his home in Georgia, and she's in Florida. So just pray that everything will work out good for him and his sister. It's a long process of healing for her, so please keep her in your prayers. And his brother, because his brother lives with his sister, so just pray for the whole family and everything that goes on around them, because they're really good people. And I love them, and they love us. They love our church, and just pray for them. Let's get back into the sermon now. John 18, 12 through 40. Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. So this is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was praying. He comes back to talk to the disciples. They were sleeping. He wakes them up. Judas comes with the detachment. And I didn't talk about this part last week. So the detachment there, you look it up in the Greek, and I've heard this a lot, but never really looked into it myself. The word in the Greek that is spiera, but actually pronounced spera, it means either 500 or 600 men, which I never realized it was that many people. But I heard it this week from somebody else preaching, and then I said, I don't know if I believe that. So I looked it up myself, and sure enough, if it's 500, if it's infantrymen, it's 600. If it's detachment of the whole army, I'm sorry, if it's infantrymen, it's 500. If it's a detachment of the whole troop, it's 10%, which would be 600. So it's either 500 or 600, but they think probably 500. So that's a lot of guys to come and arrest one man. So I'll lean toward the 500. I don't know if it was just infantrymen or what. But you got 500 men coming to arrest Jesus. And that's just to put one guy and arrest him. It says they bound him. So what's bound him mean? Just put him in cuffs? Or obviously they didn't have handcuffs back then, but they tied his hands, right? You think he was really bound?
No.
I mean, he could have got out any time he wanted. Think how many times he just disappeared when they wanted to arrest him. So again, what was my message last week? Jesus is always in control. So he was in control of this whole thing again. And he let this happen. Because what was it? Part of God's plan. So they come and they arrest him. 13. They led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. So they're going to take him and they're going to have a mock trial, because they want to put him to death. They don't like him. Now this is the family of the high priest. Annas, again, was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, and they don't like Christ at all. Okay, because he's taken away from he's taken away from their authority. And if you really look into this, they were in charge of the money. They were in charge of the sacrifices in the temple. And what did Jesus do a while ago? He turned over the tables in the temple. These people sold the sacrifices. If you came into Jerusalem with a sacrifice and they said, oh no, this sheep here has got a blemish, you have to buy from us. And they were ripping the people off. That's why he turned over the temples. Or you had to exchange your money. They exchanged the money at a higher rate than was supposed to be, which is why Christ got so mad at the temple and flipped the tables and chased people out. So Jesus was costing Caiaphas and that whole family, he was costing them money. He was reaching into their pockets. So they really hated him for that. So they were evil people. They were greedy people who ran that part of the money and treasury and all that kind of stuff. So they really hated Christ. They didn't like his preaching. They didn't like his teaching. They didn't like him costing them money. So they had evil all inside them to get rid of him. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient. That was back in, I believe, John 11. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. They were going to set the example. If anybody comes forward and tries to be the king of the Jews or lead the Jews in a separate way away from Rome or try to take some authority away from them. We're going to kill that guy. So nobody else steps forward and does the same thing, right? So one man should die for the people. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and we saw this last week, and so did another disciple. Now, it doesn't name the disciple. A lot of scholars think it's John, even though he never named himself in this. Now, that disciple was known to the high priest and went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door outside. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her, who kept the door, and brought Peter in. So Peter came inside to hear what was going on. Then the servant girl, we looked at this last week, who kept the door, said to Peter, "You're not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." So again, what is he doing there? We saw this last week. He's denying Christ. This is the whole part of, you will deny me 3 times. No, I'll never deny you. I'll follow you to death. And Peter was brave back then, but once it came, once the rubber hit the road, what was Peter doing? Denying Christ. Now the servant and the officer had made a fire of coals. We talked all about the fire of coals last week. It's only mentioned twice. Once was right here, and once was later on at the beach with the fish on it. So once he's denying Christ, and later on Christ is forgiving him. Stood there, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. So he's by the fire. Once he's by the fire, and here he's under fire, then he's by the fire, then he's later on, he's on fire. So it's 3 things with fire. And the last time is the best, right? After Christ resurrects and talks to them and sends them out into the world, he's on fire. And that's what we want. We want a Peter that's on fire. And where should we be? We should be on fire for Christ. We're under fire from the devil all the time. The devil's always trying to hurt us. And if he can't hurt us, what does he do? He attacks the weakest link. He'll attack the people around us to try to slow us down. There's no doubt that the devil's attacking the weakest people around me to try to do what? To slow me down. And to try to get me discouraged, to make me stop doing what I'm doing. And just try to make me give up. And am I going to give up? I'm not going to give up. It's just going to make me preach better. Make me preach harder. Right? Even, I got to stop saying right again. God allowed me to get cancer. Did that slow me down? Slow me down a little bit, but as Pastor Paul told me something the other day, he said, "This is the best version of me he's ever seen." I said, "Yeah, but it's making people mad at me." But you know what? I don't care. As long as I preach the truth, they're not mad at me, they're mad at God. And if they can't take it, it's not my problem. You're mad at God's word. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. So there he's by the fire. Right now he's under fire because he's trying to deny Christ. The high priest had asked Jesus about his disciples and what? And his doctrine. So now, what are they doing here? They're questioning him, and they're trying to make himself guilty. They're trying to make him, turn to, it's like when you go to court, you plead the fifth. You never have to plead. Do you ever have to make yourself guilty in court nowadays? No, you can plead the fifth. What does a court need when they try to put you on trial? Evidence and witnesses. They don't have any witnesses. They're trying to make Jesus convict himself. And we don't have that nowadays. You can plead the fifth. They're not giving him a chance now. Jesus answered him, "I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple where the Jews always meet. And in secret I have said nothing." So he's not going to give him nothing. He's going to say, "I spoke. You know what I spoke. I didn't do anything in secret. It's out there. I'm not saying nothing right now. Why do you ask me?" And here it is. "Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said." He's saying, look, go out and get some witnesses. I'm not indicting myself. You need witnesses. You can't ask me to convict myself. You go out there and you get some witnesses. There's plenty out there who know what I said. You want to try me? You need witnesses. And it's the same thing we have today. You want to get somebody in jail? They have to have witnesses. 22. But when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, "Do you answer the high priest like that?" He gave him it wasn't no slap, like a little girly slap, right? Mm-hmm. He really gave him a good palm of his hand slap. Now, think about who's out there watching. John and Peter, if it's John, so it's a disciple and John, saw this whole thing. That's got to be kind of a shock to them, because they'd never seen anybody lay a finger on Jesus, They never seen anybody slap him so hard. He's always gotten away. He's always disappeared into the crowd. Nobody was able to touch him before this. And now they're seeing him. And they're going to see him take a worse beating later on, but this is just the beginning. They saw him actually get slapped in the face, and he didn't do anything. He didn't punch back. He could have waved his arm and he could have dropped dead, for all they know. But he just stood there and took it like a man. Is he a weak Savior? No. He's meek, but don't confuse meekness with weakness. He's a strong guy, and he's going to show it later on. Jesus answered, "If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me? Why you hit me? Did I say anything wrong? Do you know what I did? Did I do anything wrong?" So he's putting it back in him. Why are you touching me? You have no witnesses. You can't say what I did wrong, yet you slapped me across the face. So he's putting it back on them because they can't find anything wrong with him. He knows he's innocent, and he knows they have no witnesses. 24. Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. So they're going to march him over to the high priest. He's going to go through like 6 trials. They're going to keep trying back and forth to get something on him. They just want him dead. But the Jews have no authority to kill a person. Did they ever kill anybody? They stoned Stephen. But they don't want to stone him. They want to hang him on a cross. And they don't have the authority to do that. 25. Now Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. Therefore they said to him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of... Did they go back to the same thing? No. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of him, whose ear Peter cut off, said, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Again, he's going to deny 3 times. So he was so bold before, and again, he's kind of afraid. He don't want to get slapped in the face. He don't want to go to jail. He don't want to be killed, right? He's trying to save his own life. He's doing the wrong thing. The guy that seemed so tough now he's being weak when Christ is being strong. But what does Christ say to us later on? When you're weak, I am strong. So when we're taking a beat from the world, who's lifting us up? Christ. So when things are going tough, who should we turn to? Christ. He'll pick us back up. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take a punch from the world, because the world's going to be punching at us all the time if you're a Christian. And we know we should give it all to God. Let God lift you back up. Don't be afraid. God's always got our back. Peter then denied again, and immediately what? A rooster crowed. So what I tell you last week, God was always in control. And he times everything out perfect. He predicted, when you deny me 3 times, the cock's going to crow. The 3rd time you denied him, bam, there was the rooster. He had control over the rooster. He had control of the timing of everything that was going to happen. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the Praetorium. So that's where, who's at the Praetorium? And it was early morning, but they themselves did not go into the Praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. So the Praetorium, they can't go in there because there's going to be unleavened bread. There's going to be unleavened bread in there, right? They can't go in there; they'll be defiled. So they can't go. So they want him to come out. They want to talk, and they need Jesus to get arrested there. They want Pilate to come out, because if they go in, Pilate's not a Jew. He works for the Roman government. Now I knew where he was from, but for some reason it's escaping me. He's from Italy somewhere, but not most of the Romans are from. He only got his position because he was married to one of Caesar's daughters. So he was kind of, one of the commentaries described him as a flunky. He wasn't the brightest. He just got his position because he was married to the right person. And he only came to the Praetorium during holidays to watch over the Jews and make sure nobody got out of hand. And he brought the guards with him and stuff. So he watched over them. But most of the time, he lived in a nice place by one of the seas and had a beach house. He pretty much called it a beach house by the sea. And then he came to Jerusalem to watch over all the festivals. So you went out to him and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" So he wanted to know what's the problem? Why am I looking at this guy? They answered and said to him, if he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. So they're just going to call him an evildoer. They're not going to say what the charges are right away. Then Pilate said to them, you take him and judge him according to your law. Therefore the judges said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. And that's kind of a lie. Because they would get papers to put people to death. And again, they stoned David. They had sent Paul out before his name was changed and had him killing people, killing Christians. But what was their method of killing people again? They could only stone people. They really want him hung up on a cross, which is the Romans' way of killing people. And that's the way Jesus was predicted to be killed in the Old Testament. 32. That the saying of Jesus, right what I just said, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying what death he would die. So it's predicted he would die with his arms spread out, pointing to the cross. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? So he's going to question Jesus. But again, how's he question him? With no witnesses. So he's trying to make Jesus convict himself. It's all done the wrong way. It's not a fair trial. Jesus answered him, are you speaking for yourself about this? Or did others tell you this concerning me? So he's trying to say which way he's like the judge here. Pilate's like the judge and the jury and the executioner. So he's trying to get which way Pilate's leaning. Is this on you as a judge, or is this on you because they're forcing you to do this? Why are you asking me this question? Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done? So he wants to know, why am I looking at you? Well, why are you even here? He just wants to know. And the other thing going on in the background, the backstory again, is his wife had a dream not to deal with this guy. That if you kill this guy, bad things are going to happen. So he wants nothing to do with Christ. Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. So he's telling him, I'm from somewhere I'm from another dimension, you kind of say. I'm from a whole other world. If my kingdom were of this world, he's put it out there, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. So he's kind of telling them, I'm from heaven. I'm from a whole other place that you know nothing about. I had to break this into two slides because it wouldn't fit in one. Letters would be too small. So 37a. Pilate therefore said to him, are you a king then? Jesus answered, you say rightly that I'm a king. Now, Rome would hate that there's another king, because what do they think? Caesar's the only king. And to them, Caesar was also what? A god. So they don't want another king, and they certainly don't want another god. So that's a problem. 37b. For this cause I was born. What's he doing there? He's going to point to his divinity. He's going to point that he always lived. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world. So he's pointing to his pre-existence. I was born and I came into the world, that I should bear witness to what? The truth. So now I came into the world and I brought with me what? I brought with me truth. What doesn't the world like today?
Truth.
The world hates truth. They say, oh, my truth isn't the same as your truth. That's a problem. That's why the world hates Christians. Because they're out there saying all different kinds of truths, that their truth doesn't match up with our truth. Men can get pregnant. What? You're never going to get me to say men can get pregnant. I'm sorry.
I just did.
I told them at my job when I was still working, I cannot partake in your delusions. I'm sorry. And they were upset. You can do you, but don't expect me to do you. I can help you with some of the stuff you believe, but the minute you start telling me I have to say that men can get pregnant, we got an issue. So, for this cause I was born, and for this cause I've come into the world, and there's a lot of other stuff I could go along with, right? For this cause I was born, and for this cause I've come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. So if you believe in the truth, you're going to hear Christ's voice and you're going to understand Christ. Why don't these people, or a lot of the people in the world, understand Christ? Because they don't understand truth. And do they want the truth? No. They've kicked truth to the curb, because if they understand the truth, and here's the problem with a lot of people, if they accept the truth, then they can't accept some of their friends. Because a lot of their friends don't want the truth. And sometimes it's their kids. If their kids are not walking in the truth, then they got to say, oh man, my kid's not walking in the truth. If I accept the truth, then I got to tell my kid what they believe. It's not true. And they'd rather be friends with their kid than tell their kid the truth. You know, you can still tell your kid you love them, and they're going in the wrong direction, can't you?
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that, is there? No. But then you're an evil parent.
No.
Then you can't be your parent's best friend. Your kid's best friend.
That's not what you're supposed to be anyway.
You're not supposed to be that. But see, if you raise your kids and tell them what right from wrong, someday they might say you're a horrible parent.
No.
Kids need to be raised in God. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he has something to come back to. If you don't give your kids Jesus, somebody's going to give them something else. You want to make sure your kids have the right God. If they reject them, they reject them. That's on them, not on you. But if you don't give them Christ, and they never find him, then that's on who? That's on you. So I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. So you want to give your kids, your friends, your neighbors, who else? Your enemies. Pray for your enemies. Give your enemies the truth. Lead your enemies to God. What happens if your enemies get saved? They're not your enemies anymore. I had somebody once who was my enemy, and years later they got saved and they stopped at a stop sign, jumped out of their car and started hugging me. I thought I was getting in a fight at an intersection when they ran toward my car. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a fight, ain't it? I jumped out of the car as fast as I could, and he started hugging me. You were right 10 years ago. I'm like, oh, thank God. I thought this was going to be a rumble in the street corner. So everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Because if you got a lot of false things in your head, you can't hear Christ. It's the devil trying to block out Christ. We want to know a lot of truth so we can hear God when he talks to us. Don't you want to hear God when he talks to you? I want God to block out Christ. I want God to block out Christ. Wow. I want God to block out the devil. Yeah. God needs to block out the devil. But the more garbage in, what do they say? Garbage in, garbage out. 38. Pilate said to him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, look at this. I find no fault in him at all. This guy looks pretty innocent to me. I don't see a problem. And again, Pilate wasn't even a Christian. And he wasn't even a Jew, he was a pagan. But he's like, this guy seems pretty solid. Oh, he wanted to let him go. He probably found more fault with the Jews. But you have a custom. So now he's making a way out for Christ. He's trying to do everything he can to let Christ go. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews? I'll let him go if you say it's okay. I want to let this guy go. And they all cried again, saying, not this man, last verse, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. And that's where I'm going to leave you for today. But let me just explain this last verse again. Barabbas was a robber. But he wasn't a regular robber. He robbed your house and robbed you. But when he robbed you, he killed you. He was a murderer and a robber. He robbed people on the highways, robbed people on the streets. He killed you and stole everything you had on you. So he was a known thief and robber and murderer. He murdered a lot of people. He was a bad dude. So I could let this guy go, Jesus, or I could let the son of Sam go. No. Or I could let this guy go. Or I could let Jack the Ripper go. Yeah, let Jack the Ripper go. Keep Jesus. That's how intent they were on killing Jesus. They'd rather let a murderer go, who was a really bad dude, than let Jesus go out there and speak the truth. Because they didn't want... Listen, our world's getting pretty close to that. And there's countries where they're crucifying pastors and killing Christians and letting murderers out of jail just because they're not Christian. And we don't want the United States to end up that way. But we're getting that way pretty fast, I think, if we don't be careful. And like I said before, England's banning books people should be reading. You know, what was the one they're banning books by what I said was C.S. Yeah, they're banning C.S. Lewis books right now, and Oswald, 1984, and different books like that. So we got trouble coming. We got trouble coming our way next. I'll leave you with that, and then we'll sing "You Never Let Go."